Hello and welcome to On the Bench. I'm your host for this episode, Brendan Sinone. I'm joined by Zach Blostein, Chris Nee. The bench crew is here to deliver an assortment of FSU news and analysis and whatnot. Before we get going on it, a shout out to our wonderful sponsors. First off, let's go with Chattanooga Whiskey. I've been going with the Turner Group the last few times. Chattanooga Whiskey will headline this episode. If you're looking for, let's say, like a nice springtime sipper. Their entry level bourbon and rye are both really good for that. But if you want to put a little hair on your chest, 111 proof. They have some single barrel rye out. They have 110 proof pre-prohibition style. They have all sorts of stuff that they're always releasing, and their standard line is as high a quality as you're going to get in the craft distillery game. So Chattanooga Whiskey, please continue to support them with tons of rave reviews from y'all who listen and around the website. So thank you for that, and please continue to do so. And then if you drink a little bit too much and you're like, you know what, I want to buy a house right now, who should
The
you hit
Turner
up?
Group.
Thank you, Chris. A little early, but that's okay. That's probably my fault. My cadence wasn't great there. I'll take responsibility for it as the espresso is starting to hit. Yes, the Turner Group. Sorry, Colin. If you're looking to buy or sell a home in the state of Florida, Colin, Amy Turner, best husband and wife duo out there. I would imagine so. I can't imagine there's anyone better. There's no one who we would refer you to other than them. They do a legitimately great job. Colin was really helpful this past week. My dad was having a Del Boca Vista type of moment in his condo community, and Colin was able to send him in a good direction for a realty attorney down that way. So the drama continues down there, but it's not Colin's fault. So the Turner Group is who would recommend you because of the wide resources and just being a generally nice, great guy. So, guys, 1 week of spring remaining. How we feeling? It's almost done, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, finish line is in sight and 12 down, 3 to go.
Hey, can I ask you? The other day you did a day 12, and it was day
Yeah.
11. Now
Yeah.
that's something that I would. That's something that I would do. How
Myself
much did that bother
4 hours
you?
later. Oh, it irritated the living what out of me. Yeah, I was sitting there and I literally got to the finger counting. And I'm like, oh, son of a gun, it happened. I was sitting in a golf cart waiting for recruits as I built that story. And for whatever reason, 12 was what was in my head. But no, it was 11. I realized it, I don't know, 9, 10 p.m. that night.
He has it. So since then, Zach, I've noticed this. And this, again, as someone who screws up things like that all the time, it doesn't bother me. I know that the creature below me here, could show that it bothered him very much without him having to tell me that. He has not done a day since then. He has been hands off of it. He's like, I'm not doing
it wrong if you don't say what day it is.
So that's a little peek behind the Chris Nee curtain there.
Tuesday will be day 13.
Are you going back to the days? You feel good about it?
Yeah, I'm marking them on my arm now so I can keep up.
I think it's because they were doing the Friday practice last week, and that probably was part. Anyways, we're almost there. We're at the finish line here. It was cool this past week, Chris, to get to see the wide range of Mike Norvell's emotions, from frustrated to a little bit more happy, but knowing that there were some fights and brouhahas and skirmishes going on in practice, to having a productively bloody Friday practice and goal line drills. Did you? I know you were there for some of the press conferences, but get to watch all the videos after. What did you make of Mike's demeanor in that 3-day stretch there in camp?
I thought he was disgusted on Tuesday, somewhat aggravated by Thursday, pleased with Friday.
What do we make of all this, Zach? So this is we are in the dog days of spring and want to glean as much as we can while not being there and trying to read behind the curtain or read between the lines sometimes. What are you making of it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this kind of phase always goes, not to be like it always happens, but every spring or fall camp, it feels like there's that point where he gets really disappointed in the team. And then they respond, 1 or 2 practices later. I'm not doubting that those were observations he made, but it's not like a new development for him. But it is a good sign that they did respond and that they are showing fight. While, he did say that it was constrained, it wasn't, the enthusiasm wasn't over the top. We saw at points last year that, Brendan and you guys noted in general, while being out there at those practices when it felt like fake enthusiasm. So it sounds like, just from Norvell's description, it wasn't that. So I guess that would be the thing I would take away the most from that, this past week of practice.
A pretty common theme in the script is it didn't start the way I wanted it to, but they did better responding later in the practice. That didn't seem to happen Tuesday, which seemed to be what really caused him to be generally unhappy with that practice. And from people that were able to view that practice, it sounded like it was sort of that kind of practice where it just had a low level of energy, wasn't very efficient, wasn't very good, just a bad day. And that would have been, what, day 10 at that point? So, yeah, it would have been day 10.
You weren't counting anymore, Chris.
I can count backwards. I'm much better at that. So it just seemed like they weren't happy. Thursday seemed a little bit like we're a little piss and vinegar. We're going to get in some fights. We're going to be really unhappy with each other. That's a line you got to toe. And, sometimes you just fight the fight to try to act like you have an edge and prove something. I always worry about that as someone who wasn't present and able to view it. Can't say whether or not how I would gauge that. I don't know if it was like Friday before BC last year or if it was legitimately like I was unhappy with Tuesday. If you guys don't come out and try to be the best version of yourself and battle your backsides off on Thursday, we're not going to be good with it. Don't know where it landed in that range. But Friday, and I wasn't there for the presser, but I did watch it after the fact. And also just seeing Mike when he leaves the practice field, sort of his demeanor. Usually he kind of wears his emotions a little bit outward. He was smiling. He was happy. I think Friday was only, 13, 14 periods. It was a shorter practice than normal, but it was intentionally shorter and it was intentionally aggressive. And they want him to be gritty, a lot of goal line and a lot of tough battle situations. Sort of, how bad do you want it? Are you going to go prove it? And I came away from both his demeanor and then also his press conference thinking he was really pleased with how they wrapped the week after a very disappointing start to the week. And I think it just kind of follows the script of the spring. But there's a degree of you can't ask someone to have an edge. They either have it or they don't, and they have to go show it. And I think he's trying to get there with this team and this group.
I mean,
well, they're also somewhat beat up, so that's something to take into account into all of this discussion.
If this team is going to overachieve, I guess, yeah, if you're talking about this being a roster that can, I guess I'm trying to, in my mind, figure out what overachieve is. If this is going to be a good football team, it's going to have to be scrappy. Like, I don't think it's an inherently elite group of talent. Like, I think it's probably one that should be above average by ACC standards. All right. But if you're going to go ahead and take it to a level where you can, do something to salvage Mike Norvell's trajectory at Florida State, it's going to have to be a scrappy group. Like, that's by design. That's what they wanted. He's talked about the edge in the talent acquisition part of it. And so that has to be a thing.
I don't want to speak for you two, but I think it's fair to say we probably all view it as a team that's going to be run first. You have a running quarterback. You have Gus Malzahn, who likes to run the ball. And first thing Gus always says about running ball is you got to be physical. Like, at the point of attack, you have to be physical. If you're not willing to line up and try to win the battles in the trenches or battles on the periphery with wide receivers or tight ends or even backs out there blocking for other players on the team, you're not going to be a good offense with Tommy Castellanos playing quarterback. I think it's probably the easiest way I can put that. So for them to be that, they have to be that way. And then defensively,
same thing. Tony White's a defensive run stopper.
And he wants to be, I forget the term he likes to use, but essentially where you're assaulting the ball. You're flying to the ball with multiple bodies. You're trying to end plays aggressively, physically, rip the ball out, create turnovers, create takeaways, a big theme of the spring. And to do either of those things offensively or defensively, the first thing you have to be is willingly aggressive, willingly physical, and just playing fast. And some of that comes with confidence in what you're being asked to do. But the other part of that is just solely an effort thing. It's an A for effort. If you get that from a football team, you're going to have more success and you're going to have failure. And that's where I think they're trying to get with this bunch as they head towards the penultimate practice and ultimately the final practice of the spring.
Day 12, day 13, and day 14. No, wait.
13, 14, 15, buddy.
Anyways,
is this because they don't have a spring game? It's just completely messed you up. Your shot.
It's been a tough week. It's been a tough 8-day stretch or so for my brain, Zach. It's just not been very crisp. I'm not sure what's happening. All right. So one thing that I did want to discuss it, and going back to Zach's point about this is kind of I don't want to say a script, because I don't think it's that. I believe Mike was legitimately not happy on Tuesday. I do believe that Jimbo, there's a pattern though, and it is about instilling response. I do remember the Jimbo days. Like there was always, you could like clockwork. There would be what, Chris, you're nodding your head.
If
Go
the
ahead.
day was good before, the next day is gonna. It wasn't a good day of practice. I had restarted in the middle.
Yeah, there was always going to be, usually in camp, like there's one day where he was really pissed off, like extremely pissed off. There's one year he dropped an F bomb to the media, and he's F right, F right. But what I wanted to dive into real quick was like what I think has been interesting in some of the things that Mike Norvell's talked about after practice that is a little different in what he's done in past years is when he talks about opportunity, and that is a buzzword for him. He loves to talk about opportunity. Someone goes down and it presents opportunities for other players, and there have been a lot of players that have gone down this camp. That's well documented up to this point. Wide receiver, offensive line in particular. But I do like this multiple times. It's caught my ear. Yeah, caught my ear. That there are players who he won't name them by name, but he's being very clear in saying there's some who are not taking the most of that opportunity, and that's not something I recall him doing in the past. You can correct me if I'm wrong. That is a new tone for him. That's a new form of accountability for him that he's using in the media, and then he'll often talk about guys who are stepping up. So you can kind of deduce like who isn't, right, by that, and the players know that. So I find that interesting.
I think some of that's the new age of college football, and also coming off 2-10.
I think the 2-10 part, yeah.
Yeah, but there's also a degree of, and we've had a coach convey this to us, they're paid employees now. Like there's a level of like, do it, or we're gonna go take your money and get somebody else who can do it. And I think that permeates a little bit more with each passing day of the current climate of college football.
Yeah, something I think a area of growth for Norvell especially has been like in these portal windows, getting guys that should not be on the roster to get out of the program has been kind of a weakness for him. I think like there's certain guys that, have been like obvious dudes that should probably not be playing at Florida State, like that stay on the roster. And I think, maybe this is a step towards him growing in that aspect of like, hey, this guy's, I challenged you to improve in these areas this spring, and you're still not stepping up to the table. Like the portal window's 2 days away, and we'll get into that. But I think that, that could be a possible reason for why he's, speaking that way. And I think it makes a lot of sense, when it comes to how FSU's trying to construct this roster. You talked about before that edge, and, if guys don't have it, it's a, theme that Norvell's brought up in press conference opportunities, media availabilities consistently over the last few months is we are exclusively trying to recruit and add players to this roster that have that edge. And, I would think that if they're rostering guys that don't, they probably don't want to, have them continue with the program. So I think that is noteworthy, because I don't think that's something that he really has expressed publicly before. Obviously, he's not calling out specific names, but
I don't think he ever will. That's not.
Yeah, that's not. I don't think that's professional, but that is something
that's important. Is he doing that in private with them though? Like, is he being super direct with guys? Which I presume he is, but again, I'm presuming that he is.
I know they haven't had their exit meetings yet. I think that happens, I would guess, right after spring ball. So that this coming weekend, probably leading into the next week. And that'll be where those, heart to heart, like, hey, it's just not working out conversations happen. And I really do think that's something I'm going to be keeping an eye on for Norvell specifically, because, I felt like, they could have been, a little bit more, I don't want to say harsh, but like more clear with certain players, like, hey, like you probably need to move on to like, find a, like for their sake too, like to find a spot where you can get on the field. Because it's not working out here. I feel like they've had some situations in the past where guys fall into that category, but somehow remain, rostered, when you could probably replace that spot with someone you feel like has more of a shot. So I'm interested to see how that looks. And I do think that that's noteworthy that, he's speaking that way publicly.
So Brendan, on the flip side of that, I want to ask you, position by position, what guy has most consistently been mentioned in a positive manner? Quarterback.
Kevin Sperry.
I agree. Running back.
Roydell Williams.
I agree. Jalen Lucas, sort of runner-up because he has playmaking ability. Wide receiver.
mean, Deuce Robinson before he got hurt.
I
Since
would
then,
say
Javon Boggs.
Yeah. I was going to land on Boggs because of the endurance and since he's been healthy throughout. Tight end.
Chase Lofton.
Yeah, I was going to land there, but they've liked that group as a whole. That is probably
that's what I struggled with.
Praised group, and it's interesting. For example, when we talked to Nick Jacobson, the tight end from Iowa who visited, he talked about like 10, 12 passes in a practice going to tight ends with the day he was there. I think we heard in the first scrimmage the tight ends were really, really good, if I recall correctly. It feels like that group's been the most consistently highly praised. It's also probably been the group that's been the most continuously healthy, I think, is probably also a feeling, especially on offense.
That helps out for sure.
O-line.
Luke Petitbon.
Yeah, that one's a slam dunk easy one. Probably most available guy, most healthy guy, plays center, ultra important position. Also, I think he sort of defines what Herb Hands wants his group to be like. Do you want to do D tackles and edge or just D line as one?
D line as one. Daryl Jackson.
Yeah, I feel the Desire twins have been brought up a hell of a lot.
And some of that is like what? So Zach's laughing.
Sorry,
how we pronounce
Desired.
It's funny. I was going to ask earlier. Is it?
I just wanted to add a vowel.
That's awesome.
I was going to ask earlier.
I'm going to start saying that now.
I didn't realize I did it till after I did it.
If it's Desir or Desir,
I think it's
nowhere did I think it was Desire.
Diaz.
That sounds like a movie.
I'm good for one per pod, guys. I caught that too, Brendan, by the way.
Thank you. So one thing, a caveat real quick is like, what is it with us ask 3, 2, 1? How much of this is us asking about players? Because I've asked about the Desert Twins, but we've heard good things about them on the back end.
I try to think of it in the viewpoint of who he voluntarily brings up.
Okay.
Or who others that matter in the sense of coaching the team have brought up. That's where I was trying to go with this exercise. Yes, you're right. There's some that have been asked about a good bit, but there's also some that just have been volunteered.
I've asked about Kevin Sperry quite a bit because we've heard good things, and so I want to see what they say about what we're hearing is matching up with what they're saying. The tone that Gus Malzahn talks about him with is noteworthy. There's a little smittenness going on there, but yeah, I guess the Desir twins have been brought up by like other players as well. So the Desire twins is probably fair.
Williams is another one, and that's largely because he knows the system, what they're doing. So
James Williams.
Yes,
Williams.
Yeah.
He's one that people lean on in the sense of having an understanding. It's a family show, Zach, so I won't do what I was going to do to you. But linebacker,
Omar Graham.
Yeah, Elijah Herring's up there too. I feel like there was one day of heavy talk about Elijah. But I know in a couple of side conversations that they've liked the ability for him to play multiple positions. And basically just he's consistent day in, day out. Defensive back.
Earl Little definitely in the beginning of it.
Mike loves bringing up Earl.
Yeah, he does. I mean, that would be the ultimate like Mike Norvell redemption arc type of player. Like there's one of those guys every year or so, other than anyone last year, but maybe that doesn't count. But there's always one, and Earl might fit that. Yeah, they like him a lot. And Mike loves Rawls. Yeah, he got dinged up in the back half of the spring. Shamara knows one who we've heard more and more about, I think, probably. But I do think the position groups that were kind of hemming and hawing a little bit with does either portend to really good depth and options, like linebacker group. I think they feel really good about that. Or the extreme opposite of like, who's stepping up, which is, I think, more the defensive back conversation.
Yeah, and it is worth noting with DBs, Lester's been banged up, hurt his knee, we believe. Edwin broke his thumb.
That's a fun injury.
Yeah, and it's going around too. Hakeem got one of those. And then you also have, what's his name? Conrad Hussey, who's been relatively unavailable throughout the spring. So that's 3 guys in that group who have been down pretty consistently. So
that was a fun exercise. Thank you for.
Yeah, I like taking the checklist 12 days in and kind of seeing who finishes off and stays in that contender. I'm not trying to name a king of the spring because we don't need a Nico situation here, boys and girls.
No, I got one in mind. We're going to roll it out on Easter Sunday.
It's after the spring.
The king of the spring.
Okay.
Or could be kings of the spring.
Ooh. I'm in favor of that one.
We'll see. So as 3, 2, 1. As we go back to wrapping up football talk, but I want to kind of transition it into the transfer portal. Zach tease. We are going to discuss that. It opens up on Wednesday, April 16th through I think April 25th.
Yeah, it's 10 days long.
So it's and that a reminder for people: you don't have to be committed by then, or signed or enrolled. You just have to be in the portal.
Yeah, there's also a 48-hour window for schools to get you in. So in reality, it turns into like a 12-day thing. If you're a grad transfer, you can also enter after that window. There's nuance to it.
Or if a coach just randomly gets fired, which
Kent State,
Stanford. So actually,
that
that'll be a name we'll talk about. Is someone from there. So, anyways, that's coming up. So the two sides of the coin here to talk about before we get into like positions of need and stuff is like just how FSU is going to handle its own roster and own attrition exiting this spring. Like we said, you got 3 more practices left, still more data, data sets, samples to kind of take away there, but you have a pretty good idea of what you have and what you don't have at this point. With the caveat, guys, being the injuries that you've had, especially I think at wide receiver and who they've happened to with that group of second year and maybe even like a third year players like Hakeem Williams, Jaylen Brown to a lesser extent with his injury, but he had a little one too. I mean, that position group's been beaten to hell. How do you think that impacts like the eval process, the way FSU looks at specifically, let's say wide receiver and maybe DB to an extent too, but position groups that were going to be really closely vetted that you exit without a ton of clarity, maybe other than a couple spots? Do you think that makes it more likely? Like what I'm interested in, I want to get your thoughts on is are you more likely to stand pat because you think you know what you have with guys, but you don't know for sure, so you're going to bank on figuring it out? Maybe what you saw from Lewayne McCoy for a few days, and then what you saw from him in tour of duty, or is that going to make you more inclined to churn through the roster there, try to create some space salary wise, roster space wise, and go to the portal? Like I don't know how you evaluate some position groups where you haven't really gotten to see guys practice more than 3 or 4 days.
So I think at wide receiver, Deuce and Squirrel were recruited here to be starters here. I think they still believe in both of those. They really liked what they saw from Deuce. Squirrel's been a little slow all spring because he's coming off an injury. So I think there it comes down to the discussion, a 2-pronged one. First, does anybody just leave you because they leave you, not you forcing them out? They just depart. If that room starts thinning out number-wise, then yes, you probably need to go get somebody who's going to help you as a 2-deep type of solution. Or do you feel like someone who you view as a 2-deep solution at this point in the spring is you can upgrade? If you can do that, then yes. I think DB is a no doubter. You probably should go get a DB because you've kind of seen in spring with that position, a very, very important position. FSU is going to be a run team. I think they can get away with something lesser at receiver if necessary, if you've got enough depth. Secondary is a necessity for them to be a good defense. I think you've seen what happens if you get thin on numbers at that position. I think it's kind of a necessity to probably go get one. To be perfectly honest, I think all 3 of us felt that way before the spring too. So that's a carryover type of thing. But I also think that at the end of the day, spring portal-wise, it's also what's available, but adding another possible swing tackle maybe in case Pettis or Hansen runs into an issue, for example, or adding another piece on defensive line that can help you end football plays because you can never have enough of that. You always want to stockpile that. So for me, it's sort of those 4. I'm not looking at running back because you got Chroma coming in. I'm not looking at tight end because I think you're real happy with that group. Not looking at quarterback unless it's this changes the trajectory of everything type of guy. And, not looking at linebacker because I think they actually really, really like their linebacker group. And I think they really like the depth of that group. So that's about all I got on that.
Yeah, I agree with you mostly on the position groups that you could possibly see additions at. I think defense is definitely they need a DB. I think even before the spring, like just from a number standpoint, without any of the injuries in play, which have plagued that group, like you need more numbers in that position group to make sure that you're fielding a full two deep throughout the season. And then, I think D-line, another guy that can rush the passer would be, something I would put a premium on. And I think FSU is probably thinking in a similar light. And then depending on the return of Jason Jenkins and when that could be, like adding another guy and a similar, skill set, big body, who can, play either in that, nose spot or at one of the DN spots. Like, I think that would probably be worthwhile to be in that market. But we've seen in the past, like that's something with the spring window that's going to be noteworthy is like there's not going to be a lot of options. Everyone always wants to hype up the spring portal window as like, your roster is going to get gutted. But it just never happens that way. And, I know teams are going to be throwing a ton of money around because this could be the final window before you have to get everything cleared through the clearinghouse with the house, settlement, the overlook committee or whatever going through and making sure that all these oversight. Yeah, that's a better description. I think that is noteworthy. And I do not expect FSU to be like a top spender when it comes to those high end talents that enter the portal at these positions. I think they're not.
People are getting mad at that, Zach. People are listening, getting mad.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see that happening. And I think it has to do with wanting to make sure that you retain and hold on to the majority of your roster. Because if you're bringing in someone that we saw last spring window, that there were a number of D linemen that entered that ended up being pretty good, but they made a ton more money than the D linemen that entered in the previous December transfer portal window, just because of the limited supply and high demand amongst the teams that were in the market for those D linemen. So I think that's something to note on offense. I agree, probably no quarterback. I would think no running back, although I want to hear your thoughts on that, Brendan. I just think with what you've invested in Usman Kroma, because we know that was not cheap to flip him in the end. I just can't imagine that they would go and spend on another back unless it's some very just not high profile guy that you're adding to that room. And then no tight end, no quarterback. I think O-line, that's always a possibility just because you never want to be short on potential tackle guys. I think that would make sense, like a swing tackle type. We've seen them.
But like everyone wants a swing tackle.
Yeah,
and if they're good enough to be a swing tackle at Florida State, they're at a school like Florida State. Not to say FSU's tackle situation's been great, perpetually the last decade. But if they're good enough to be a swing tackle at a Power 4 program, and they're going to get enough money to be a starting tackle at a Big 12 program or a good G5 one.
Agreed. So like all this is with the caveat that like it's if you find a guy that makes a ton of sense, and there's a lot more that's a lot less likely to happen in this window than in the December portal window, where it's just a flood of names going in at various positions, and you have a lot more options. There's more supply, and then I think at receiver it just depends on who leaves. I think it makes sense to potentially add someone there depending on who, if anyone exits that room this spring. That's the position group I'm looking at the most. I posted that on Nose 24/7, like under Brennan's story about which positions could see attrition this window. Like I think that's the one I'm looking at the closest for possible departures, because I do think that there's just some like players there that have kind of, it's like the spring was do or die kind of about whether or not they're gonna come into form and be ready to contribute, and some of those guys just I don't think have done that. So I could
had the opportunity to do it.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. The injury stuff is interesting to me, and I truly don't know which way I lean on that. because like also from a player's perspective, right? If they were thinking about entering the portal, what's that going to look like now that they're going into the portal with an injury, right? Like probably not going to be as high demand, probably not going to make as much money as you would have if you went to the portal healthy, because that's always these teams aren't looking to take players that are going to be out for months and whatever, right? Whatever the situation is. So that is something to keep in mind as well. I know we talked about FSU's perspective on whether they keep a guy or not. Like from a player's perspective, it could lead them to be more inclined to want to stay. So I'm interested to see how that works out as well.
Trying to think of where to take the conversation now, because I thought you guys did a good job of setting up what we think they need to add in the transfer portal. I think Zach's point of the financial, I don't want to say restriction because that might be perceived incorrectly. You are going to have to be judicious. Like I think they will be active, but how aggressive are they in trying to? Like I don't think we see a Keon Coleman type of addition this spring window. I don't know if that's what they have the ability to go ahead and do the way the roster's composed right now. I will say this. I think this is an important context. So we've talked about the 105 man not scholarship, just roster limit. Sorry, just roster limit. That is with the belief a few things. One, that the House settlement does go through, which it does seems like that's the most likely scenario right now. But I think they're talking again. What is it today, Chris?
Yeah, it's supposed to be today.
So who knows? But yeah, there might be clarity to this by the time you guys listen to this podcast. But second with that is that the judge hearing the case did mention last week that she would like to see players on roster spots grandfathered in, which would mean there's not a 105 limit this year. Correct? I think that's how I'm interpreting
it. Yeah,
I
didn't specifically hear that comment, but one would presume that it's sort of like, the eligibility thing. But that gets into...
Why did that tickle you? Why was that funny to you?
Slippery slope of when does the limit become the actual limit? Like we've had an issue in college athletics here in recent years of actually defining terms like, eligibility. Like somehow an FSU basketball player who has existed for multiple years and played every year of what should be his eligibility still has another year. I don't get it. I don't understand it, but it exists, and it's not solely him. I would love for it to get back to it's 105, it's 105, it's 105. That's the only thing that matters. I will say on that topic, had a conversation late last week. Their FSU has no concerns about 105. Like they're going to be there, they're going to be fine there, and they believe they can build their roster in the correct manner to meet that number when it has to be met, which is basically August.
Okay, so if this idea of it, if this goes through where they say, hey, there actually are no roster limits this year, and 105 grandfathered in everyone who's currently on the roster right now, that's walk-ons, that's scholarship players, that's guys getting 0 NIL, that's guys getting $1 million in NIL. Like if that goes through, or close to $1 million, whatever. I know people like to freak out over the difference between $1 million and 850,000, but not pocket counting. If there's this 105 non-limit and you've been accounting for 105, as most programs probably have, and all of a sudden now it's not. This is where I think like the SEC programs and the Big Ten can have a major advantage, because now you can go ahead and add more, and you can get to like 130 or 120, whatever the number is. You can go ahead and find extra players, and whether that's just you taking a flyer on an FCS transfer and paying 50,000 to them or whatever, or poaching someone from a roster like Florida State where you maybe have a logjam of unknowns at one position like wide receiver, right? Former blue chip guys. Like I'm just going to throw out a name. Like, can you go after a LaWayne McCoy, who has played as a freshman, who we know was coveted by teams trying to tamper in this past window, and can you pay him double what FSU would be willing to pay with this market, and being able to go to 110, 115 players just because you can double it and give them the same path to playing time, which would be like 150, 200 snaps, something like that. Like I think that's kind of what you're looking at FSU battling from a retention standpoint, and then also in a competing on the transfer market standpoint as well. Which brings me to overarching point that I had for all this. I think FSU probably has to be very tactful in how it goes about evaluating in this process. And I think we'll end up seeing a lot of like FCS types, G5 types, which I'm not necessarily like opposed to. But I think that's ultimately what you're going to do is taking those kind of guys to help bolster depth and maybe hit on one or two of them and they exceed your expectations athletically.
More defense than offense, in the sense of playing defense versus playing offense, not recruiting defense.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah, I think so, because I do think they like the roster. I do think they like the roster they've compiled. I do. I have concerns about a few position groups more than maybe they do. Not maybe, definitely more than they do, and that's fine. We can agree to disagree on it. But I think they generally feel comfortable with where they're at. But they do see positions where they can get better. I think defensive backfield, Zach mentioned, is one. I think defensive line is one. I think wide receiver is ultimately going to be one that they explore, whether they find someone who fits, and it'll be contingent on attrition. Yes. Running back, I don't know that they're going to be. I'm curious, still trying to dig and find out more on that. Like, I think they like what they have at running back and what they have coming in at running back with Usman Chroma. I'm a little bit more skeptical. I'm not skeptical on Chroma. I think that's a dude who's going to be really good sooner rather than later. If you want to roll the dice there, and financially they have to for him to be the guy. But man, like I don't know that you have anything special outside of him, other than like Jalen Lucas and a gadgety, not that be pejorative, but in that type of role.
A little off topic here, but Brendan, buy or no?
Sponsored by
Group.
Sponsored by the
yeah. Sorry, Colin.
Thing. You put in a crystal ball for Nico Iamalieva to North Carolina solely based on a Facebook post.
Yeah.
Dude, you have their message board in a storm right now. It's insane.
Content business, baby. It's not solely on that. Like that, like UNC's in the market for UNC's in the market for a quarterback. I think some of our initial reporting when we were talking about schools that not our initial, like not mine, but like Chris Summer and Matt Zenitz, their initial reporting was mentioning UNC. So it's all of it combined, and it's not just a Facebook message. It's not. I don't want to get into it because that's not for public consumption. But it's not just some fan post that said that or something like that. It's from someone who knows someone who would know something.
Gotcha.
So is it ironclad? No. It's a crystal ball, guys. It's not me saying that it's for sure going to happen. It's me predicting that I think this could happen. This is.
I thought I was the one that was insecure about crystal balls.
I still do them.
People just like to see the world burn, and Brendan's apparently that person.
I also put in a crystal ball for Landon Duckworth to go to Ole Miss and not Florida State.
Immediately off a South Carolina visit.
He just keeps visiting other places that aren't Florida State, man.
Yeah.
You put in a crystal ball that's not Florida State.
Yeah.
Just put it on Foggy. Yeah, I don't think he's gonna end up here. I don't think that's a real.
Oh, you're saying that I should have put one in for South Carolina other than Ole Miss. I could always switch that. It's fine.
Just the company you keep.
Oh, okay. Do you care to elaborate on that, Chris?
No, I don't.
Okay.
You're not gonna make me.
Zach, is that all you wanted? Is that what you want to interject on?
Yeah, I saw people freaking out on Twitter and on their message board about it, so I wanted to bring that up because I knew you talked about it when we were on a phone call this morning, but I didn't realize you actually did it.
Maybe I'll get things moving early on this morning. Yeah, I don't know. I'm helping out the network. What can I say?
Or giving them a lot of stress.
Taking this off topic, I will add it.
No. Real quick. Why do people get stressed out about having to? Why does that stress people out?
I don't know, but that's something that I remember you putting in a troll crystal ball or something for a guy to UF, and they were not happy.
And he ended up going to UF.
I don't think he ended up going to UF.
Oh, that was someone else who ended up. Oh, it's a guy I put in who off of a UF visit to go to Georgia, and he went to Georgia.
I think you put it in for UF, and he ended up going elsewhere.
All right, so I talked to Logan Flaherty, 27 quarterback. He did bring up an interesting comment. He was at FSU's Friday practice. Again, shortened practice, only about 13 periods. He said, as a quarterback viewing it, two things. One, I asked him directly, like, any hesitation because Gus is the OC and the stereotypes that come with him with quarterbacks. He said, no, his high school coach actually worked with Gus at Auburn. Some of the system they utilize at Port Charlotte is similar to what Gus used to utilize at Auburn. So, no, there's not any concerns there. Second thing he said to me that I thought was more interesting, and the quote will be in the story, which I'll run today, probably around noon, because somebody flooded the front page this morning, was
Do you care to elaborate on that, Chris?
that was all of us. We all did that.
Okay.
All three of us posted something like within 12 minutes of each other.
Who posted it first?
Probably you, and then
Okay.
probably Zach, and then I threw a basketball one up there because, it's me. Flaherty said the thing that interested him or that he noticed about the quarterback position in that practice was that what each quarterback had asked to do specified like that quarterback. Like it played to that quarterback more than it being, hey, we're all going to try to do the same thing. Tommy using his legs, Sperry using more pocket passing, Brock being a little bit more pocket passing. We know all three of those guys can use their legs. All three of those guys can use their arm. But he said it just felt like it I forget the exact term he used in the quote, but essentially that it focused upon the individual effectively and using them in the offense. Also with what offensive line and what receivers were at their disposal. Just thought it was interesting, with practice being closed and the offense under Gus being such a topic of conversation throughout the spring. Different people have kind of given different viewpoints on that. I thought Darian Williams came out of practice a little bit concerned about how receivers used in the offense based on the way he talked about Gus Malzahn on offense and his commitment. I thought Logan Flaherty came out feeling pretty confident about quarterbacks are going to be used to their strengths. Just different things I like taking away from some of those different interviews that we've had throughout the 12 practices to date.
I had someone message me, "Hi, Mothy de Goat. Hey, question, brother. What made you put in the crystal ball for him to UNC?" Look, I'm starting to get people all up in arms. I guess that was what I wanted to do. I don't know. I'm not seeing the consequences of my actions.
Good. What do we want to get in some questions from the?
Yeah, sure. Let's take some listener questions here. All right. Starting off with FSU Bone. Oh, wait, sorry. This is the one I want to start with. 3, 2, 1. Not sure what our over-under is for wins, but where do you guys sit as of now? I don't want to throw out a number. I want to ask if you guys are ready, if you've recovered from last season enough to eventually feel comfortable putting out a number.
Not at this point, but yeah, I'll put out a number before they kick off.
I think right now my number is 7.
I think we said when we did the exercise of whether they checked their 12 criteria or whatever we had, it was like 6.5 or whatever. And I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. That's
What's
probably
Vegas at? I haven't even looked.
I don't know. I haven't
I think
checked.
they're 6.5. I want to say.
It sounds about right.
Or 6.5 to 7.5, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah, I think if they can stay healthy, I think 7 is my number.
All I'm saying, guys, is I took the under last year. No one wants to talk about that. Everyone wants to know how wrong we were. No one wants to say Sano took the under.
How far under?
It doesn't matter. That's the thing about over-unders. If you hit under, you win.
Okay, that's fair. I'll give you a win for once in your
Yeah! This is from the Teal Deal 94. Between Brock Glenn, Sperry, or an unknown transfer QB, who is the starter next year?
I don't think they're taking. Oh, next year?
Yeah.
Who the hell knows? I mean, will those two even be on the roster? Like, come on, have we learned nothing
Year
about
to year?
6
All right,
years? Like,
let's say FSU wins 7 games next year. Not enough to have a hot seat. What's that, Zach? Why are you eyebrows up?
I'm not doing anything.
You okay?
damn broccoli head teenagers.
Zach asks, "What's a teenager?" Anything that ends with a teen would be the teens. So 7 wins. Let's say that's kind of the barometer for them, and nothing to get Mike Norvell fired, and you go into 2026 with Brock Glenn, Kevin Sperry. I don't know how attractive you will be to a transfer quarterback, but you always be able to find one, right? Just the caliber and the fit.
In the pay.
In the pay, yeah, for sure. For sure, that matters. Just case in point, Tennessee transfer portal. Nico, I'm not going to say the last name. I'm not going to try.
I'm a leaving.
I don't think that's appropriate. I think your best bet would be, unless you see major strides from Brock Glenn at this point, unless you see major strides during the course of the year, I think your best bet would be to last stand effort to get a top quarterback, one who fits Gus's system. And I think right now, like, I think it's more likely that you're building with the future in mind with Sperry than you are Brock Glenn. Based on just the 12 practices in the spring that we've had, I think he's been so good and has captured their imagination so much. And that's from talking to different people. That's from just the tone in which it's discussed. Like, that's where my gut is like, that's what you're building towards. Whether you think he's going to be ready or not to be your dude in 2026. I mean, if you think it's close with him and Brock Glenn, if you think it's at all close where he's jumped past him and how he manages the offense, then maybe you roll with Kevin Sperry, you save money there, and you add more pieces around him.
I think that's a fair and good answer.
Sorry, I realized I rambled and I took.
No, I actually like that answer.
Thank you, Chris.
I struggle to forecast rosters a year ahead, especially because I'm currently in basketball mode, and like they just don't exist. Like there is no carryover. It doesn't really exist much anymore in college athletics. So I don't invest time in it much anymore, I guess is the best way I can put it.
I invest a lot of time. Do you have anything to add to that, Zach?
No, I agree with you. I mean, if Sperry gets close to Glenn, I could see them doing that. My projection would be a portal guy, but that's just because, I kind of side with Chris. Like, it's just so hard to project, and I feel like that would be the most likely thing to happen, considering you'd be handing the reins to Sperry or Glenn next season. I just don't. Feels unlikely.
I will say this goes back. We articulated it. I remember back in during the DJ Uiagalelei pursuit, as well as the Cam Ward pursuit. We know how that ended. But at the time, something that I had voiced was, you've seen some programs in college football get into a cycle where they become reliant on the portal for a quarterback. And I'm not necessarily like, I don't know if that's a bad thing or not, but you do kind of limit your options. Now, if you hit, like Notre Dame hit with Riley Leonard, like he wasn't an all-star, but that worked for them. And they did fine with Sam Hartman the year before. They're not they didn't take one this year though, right?
No, they're rolling with a younger
finally
kid.
But like it could take you a couple of years to get out of it, and it's kind of contingent on like you finally have to bank and hit one, and then get them to stay for a year or two. So maybe that's where FSU's at with Kevin Sperry. It's probably too early to tell, but it is, as you're now seeing this as we're talking about and projecting the quarterback position out. That is a thing that I think is worth talking about. It's like you decided to put your eggs in the transfer quarterback basket last year. That basically forced you to do it again this year, and it might force you to do it again in another year from now.
High school quarterback recruiting is just such a crapshoot at this point. I mean,
you used to the rankings from the 20.
Yeah, that's what I was just pulling up. The 2023 quarterback class, I think it's like maybe the top 8 kids, like 7 of them have transferred. Everyone but Arch Manning basically has transferred out of the initial program they signed with. So it's just
and that's not even like a knock on the rankings. Like that just wasn't a great quarterback class in general.
Yeah, and like some of those, like Dante Moore, for instance, he went to UCLA and upgraded to go to Oregon. Like, some of these guys just, had to find a different situation or whatever. But yeah, it's just such a crapshoot. That's why I just think it's more likely that you roll with a transfer, especially if they, are still in very much win now mode, like to get out of the situation they're in.
This is from Toxic Null. Do you think this team is more player led than last year? Any caveat for us? Probably hard to answer without being there and seeing it, which I appreciate you giving us that.
You have a more vocal quarterback, which is a positive. Not a knock on DJ, just wasn't an overly vocal guy. Not a bad guy. I think guys liked him on the team, just not overly vocal. I've heard Tommy is willingly vocal. He'll speak up. He'll take it, when it's on him. He'll also say something when it's on somebody else. Defensively, I don't know. I mean, a lot of people talk about Darryl being a leader. Darryl's never been an overly outward personality. Obviously, stands out like a behemoth, and he just has a physical presence. But I don't know how he's been vocally despite getting praise because we haven't been able to see it. So I don't know. I think though, if your quarterback position is better at that, usually helps you as a team.
Yeah, I think it's a low bar personally, just 'cause there was like almost no leadership on the last year's team. But I mean, I think so. I mean, we've heard like a few names stand out, like Earl Little on defense. Some of the linebacker room, I've heard they're pretty mature and vocal. And then on the D line, there's James Williams, like some of those newer guys on the O line too. I think Luke Pettibon's been mentioned as someone that's been vocal as a leader type in winter workouts and into spring ball. So I mean, we can't speak to it like super well, but like I said, it's pretty low bar when comparing to last year's team. But I don't want to go out here and say this is a completely player-led team. That's probably not what this is.
They're still pushing it to become a player-led team, which I think is noteworthy. I don't remember that being the case. I think if we want to say the ultimate version of it that we've seen in our time covering Florida State, it would probably be that 2023 team, right? And
you had a bunch of alphas running around. I mean, Verse was like a crazed man going out to practice. If he was either going to make sure you were going to practice really well, or he's going to try to beat the ever-loving out of you and like let you know he did it. So I don't know that they have that kind of dude. That's tough to
they just had so many alpha personalities. Jerry and Jones, Keon Coleman,
Jordan Travis.
Like it was.
Trey was an all good guy that everybody liked, and
it was a really good combination of personalities that melded together. So my thought is, like, I don't think we know, and I don't think we will know, and there's no way to quantify it anyways, but like I don't think we'll know until bullets start flying and like you're in the season. Because there was talk about last year about like older guys stepping up, and they liked the way Pat Payton, like we saw Pat Payton was vocal and demonstrative in practice and practicing hard in camp. And then once the fan, like all that stuff starts changing real quick. And that brings me back to that.
They brought Pat, Josh, and Darius to kickoff, and of those three, only one really lived up to the bargain on the year, and that was Josh.
Who probably would have, honestly, if we had said before the season, who would have been the least likely to live up to that, it probably would have been Josh. So, like, credit to him. He finished his end of the bargain and exceeded it. But my point being is like that. I remember us talking about, if they lost to Georgia Tech, if they couldn't run the ball against Georgia Tech, that would shift the way we viewed it, the team. Little did I know, even with those caveats, even with couching it that way, which no one gives us credit for at least articulating that, but whatever, that's fine. If that ended up happening, I still had no idea that it would bottom out that much until we got that Boston College Friday practice. And even then you were like, it was pretty gross.
The second half was the most quit moment I've ever seen in a Mike Norvell program.
Yeah, that was a few weeks later. Like it was happening.
So few people looked like they gave rats, about the fact that they were just getting blown off the field at SMU, and it was disgusting. I flat out thought that team quit. I asked Mike Norvell immediately after that game in the post-game press conference if he thought his team had quit, for that very reason. It was awful to watch. Like that's a horrible thing to watch. And I hope there's enough players that were part of that last year that were disgusted by that, who may have been too young or not in enough of a role to feel like they could do anything about it, who now understand I am in a position where I need to do something about it. Hopefully that is a lesson learned for the guys that are on this roster that were on this roster a season ago. Also, hopefully, and I do think like a guy like Deuce Robinson, we didn't mention him, but I do think Deuce is a great guy. Like Deuce has a excellent personality that I think is easy to like. He's also a good football player, and those two things together usually pay off to some degree. I think adding some pieces like that, hopefully those guys help to, take a place in the program where they also have a leadership role and can make a difference.
Let's see. Death to Gators. What is going on with Tylon Lee? He was quiet as a church mouse.
Yeah, he hasn't been mentioned a ton. It's been kind of interesting. I think it's probably fair to ask about him at this point.
I have some intel on that. I think it's a maturity thing, like both on and off the field. Like they just want to see him grow in that aspect, for him to really take that next step. And anytime you're bringing in a high school player as a mid-year enrollee, skipping their last semester of senior year, like that's a possibility. Guys mature at different times, so I think it's something that they're continuing to work towards. But I was told by a source this week that he still very much has a chance to be a really good player. It's got to all come together, and he's got to fully buy in.
So the Desir twins again come to mind. Their
Yeah.
motor has been praised, that they go really hard, really fast, consistently on a daily basis. That's a tough thing for freshmen to do. I'm sure Kevin Wynn's going through some of that, for example.
I think Kevin Wynn's, like, in the last few practices, I've heard he's basically like looped into that like Desir twin conversation of like he can very much help us. He was also dealing, I think, with an injury.
Yeah, I believe they had said he was slow.
Coming into Florida State, he was dealing with an injury.
But like that limited stuff. I think he's playing with like a knee brace or some kind of brace on his leg.
Are we allowed to say that?
It's tough to ask freshmen
I haven't been out there
linemen to just instantly go. The ones that do, it's more unique than is common.
Do we find, all right, Buyers Known, sponsored by
the Turner Group.
Do we find that we're hearing about multiple true freshmen who could be impact players on the defensive line to be concerning?
Well, who all is it? The Desir twins. Lee was someone who had that hype kind of put upon him coming in, partly because of a ranking.
And Kevin Wynn. So that's three. There's three there.
Plus Brent Eldard, who's a walk-on player who did.
Yeah, he's not a freshman though.
Yeah, but they're also talking about him being like a possible contributor this year, which I don't know is as much of a red flag, but like, I do think that it is something of note that you have those four guys being mentioned. And part of that's injury too. Like they've had, Daniel Lyons and Jason Jenkins out, who are projected at the very least two deep guys for them this upcoming season, depending on when they get back. But yeah, I mean, it is noteworthy, right? If you're having to depend on those guys being, rotational players, anytime you're throwing true freshmen into the the literal trenches, like it, that's a tough thing to do.
Brendan, you may know these numbers off of Nebraska. The dispersal of snaps. Is it a rotation thing in the sense of like you're not asking Kevin Wynn to go play 30 snaps per game. You're asking him to play 12 at a really high level over 12 games, 150 in a year, basically, at a really high level. I think that's that is one thing I wish we were able to see more than one scrimmage for, in the sense of just seeing how much is the rotation there, in the sense of these guys being thrown in on first and or second team reps.
But even that, like with what we saw in the scrimmage and what they've been doing throughout the spring, and Tony White's talked about this, like so much of it's them just trying to figure out, like, okay, who does this well? Like who rushes from this position well, or who is a better run defense, whatever data points they're trying to assemble, and who works well with next to each other. I think that's still a big part of what they've been trying to figure out. So I don't even know, like right now, what the crafting will look like for the season. I'm intrigued by it, very much so. I think looking back at Nebraska last year, I think there was a decent, given that it was like there was a decent amount of rotating. I don't think it was anything drastically different than what Florida State was doing on defense last year. But I would also say too is that FSU's defensive numbers are kind of skewed by they were so poor, below expectations of what they thought they were going to be, that there was a lot of guys who were starting multiple games and then getting yanked and getting replaced. I know that happens to some extent for every college football season. You kind of misjudge something, someone gets hurt, whatever. But it was kind of on par, I think, for the amount of like players who had 100 or more snaps on defense for both sides. So it wasn't anything drastic. Let's see. BMS13C asks, who are the best 5 players on the team? It's a good exercise to do, because I do want to do, like, after the spring concludes here coming up, like who the dudes are, like who we know FSU doesn't just feel good about, but feels great about, like, and that'll be their opinion, right? But like, who are the dudes? So who would your 5 be? Let's start with you, Chris.
They need Darryl Jackson to be one of those 5 without a shadow of a doubt, and he's capable of it.
Was good last year.
They need Tommy to be one of those. You're only as good as your quarterback. I don't know that I feel like he should be in that 5, but they need him to be in that 5.
Yeah, that's not the conversation. I agree with you. The conversation is who are the 5 best players on the team. If this was CFB 25,
so
who's
5
ranked
most talented dudes?
Who's ranked the highest? Who would you rate, regardless of position or?
Well, I'm taking Luke Pettibon without a shadow of a doubt. I think he's a good leader, excellent center, and such an important position. I think Deuce Robinson's one of your most talented people on the football team without a shadow of a doubt. I'll keep Darryl on that list, so that's 3.
4. Wait, no, I already had Daryl on it. I counted
Yeah.
twice.
Um,
Me numbers today. What did I say? 12, 13, and 14? Or did I say 13, 14, 14 earlier? Whatever,
trying
just get your
to do
twins.
more without glancing over somebody by accident.
Could I offer you James Williams?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
hesitant by.
yeah.
No. I'm good with it. I just
I'm gonna loop you into the angry Nebraska fans.
everybody's out here pissing off a fan base today. He's got the Hills. I'll take the Huskers.
They'll only be pissed off if they don't get him.
And I guess the fifth for me would be. I want to put Q on there, but like he's got to be more consistent. Is a consistent thing I keep hearing about him, and in the sense of just like make the play you're supposed to make every play.
You say Quindarius?
Yeah.
Nah, I think that's poor. I know it's your list, but that's a shitty last one.
Okay.
Let him make his list.
No,
right,
yeah, fine. Good list. Great
Right,
list.
who's your 5 Sinone since you're all knowing?
I'll add. I like the top 4 since I put the input of James Williams in there. I'm just saying I had the under last year. All knowing, all Sinone.
I hope people give you hate in the comments.
They probably will. Just admit it. Just admit it. You were wrong. Squirrel White, maybe. It's tough because he's been out for so much. But like, if he's what he was in 2022, like that's a top 5 guy on your roster. The other name I was thinking about was Earl Little. I'm not ready to buy that yet.
I'm still hurt.
Yeah, no, me too. I know what they like, what they've seen. Yeah, I guess I'll go Squirrel White.
I go Deuce, Daryl, Squirrel, Luke, and Elijah Herring.
So I almost used Elijah as my fit for what it's worth. So
I just think he's a more reliable pick than like Quindarius, just because I know I've heard similar with Quindarius still having.
We don't know that Quindarius is the best cornerback on the roster right now.
He may very likely not be.
He may not even be the second best. He may be your third.
And I think he probably is at least that. Who other than him and Jabril?
Lester.
Shamar no would be the one.
Yeah, Shamar would probably be the next guy.
That's more of a long term, but
and Edwin's more nickel before somebody brings him up. And I do like Edwin a lot. Joseph.
Oh, so I was
texting there, Brendan. Sorry.
It's a lot going on. All right, we're at an hour. I think I can tell we're starting to derail a little bit. There was a lot of other good questions. Maybe I'll do a non-oral mailbag with those instead.
I feel like people like it when we derail.
They do until they don't. Some people really want just a strict, rigid podcast where we talk only about FSU football and we don't paint outside the lines. Some like the banter. It's a buffet. Take what you like.
We should do another Falk on the Road next episode.
All right. For Zach Blosting, Chris Nee, I'm Brendan Sinone. This has been I almost said Falk on the Road. This has been On the Bench. We'll talk to you guys later.